and welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Jenny.
Thank you for joining us for episode 189 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 45 of A Storm of Swords, that's Cat 5.
As always, we'll chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Jenny?
I'm doing well, how are you?
So, alert listeners might have noticed that something is slightly different. I have had a haircut. No, that's not it. Yes, we have a special guest co-host today. The one and only Jenny of Allstone. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
McKelly is off seeing his mum, who's not doing so well, and so we wish McKelly and his mother all the best. And we are so grateful to you for graciously and valiantly, because it takes... it's reminded me how nerve-wracking it is, actually, working with you this week. I've become nervous about it, whereas normally it's just like, it's chapter 108. It's episode 189. It's second nature to us now. But
exactly, I've been nervous since I found out I was doing it. So,
well, so far so good. By the way, I mean I thought that was real smooth. McKelly flubs those lines all the time. So,
well, I remembered my name, so that's a plus.
and the notes say McKelly, so you did well to go around that. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your connection to the podcast?
Well, I came to the books from the show, like a lot of show watchers. I watched a couple of shows, and then I read all of the books before I watched any more shows, and then I just needed more content. So I started looking around for different websites online. And, years later, obviously, that led to listening to podcasts. And you guys happen to be the one that I like the most. So here we are.
And why Jenny of Allstones? I mean, obviously, of Allstones is your last name, as it happens. But is it a special affinity for Jenny of Allstones, or?
Well, it's convenient that I'll just tell everybody my name is actually Jenny. So it's just convenient that she's in the book. But no, I do love the story of it because I think it's a choice there that Prince Duncan made. He gave up a kingdom for her. And right. I think George Martin based that loosely on King Edward VIII and his marriage to Wallis Simpson, where he abdicated the throne and married her instead. And I just think that is an amazing choice to make. Is it the right choice? I guess that's a question for each person, but
I think King Edward made more dubious choices than that later in life. But I'm with you. Giving up the throne for romance, all for that. That's for real. So one thing, just a reminder to people, because we've mentioned Jenny on the podcast many times, but Jenny painted a painting of McKelly and I, which is still one of our most treasured possessions. We love that painting. It's a picture of us at our haberdashery in Moultown, which is just the perfect. We were so moved to receive it, and we love it too. It's in his house. I don't know why he gets preference exactly, but
maybe you should share it, like have custody.
Yeah, that's it. Timeshare the thing. Yeah, that's true. So, at the last Sustainer call, you posed a very interesting question to us, which was name 5 things. And you threw at me 5 families from the Crown lands, which was so hard.
I did throw you a very hard question.
That was really hard. So I'm coming back at you. And this one is so hard that I have not actually been able to find five answers for it yet. So if you get 3, you've done very, very well. So can you do 5 characters whose names are alliterative?
Oh.
For example, Tina Turner or Ozzy Osbourne, but from the books.
From the books, not just this chapter, or
no, not just. But weirdly, there are 2 in this chapter. In fact, and the third one gets mentioned as well. So you might be able to get 3.
Okay, so Galbert Glover.
Very good in this chapter.
And Mage Mormont, also in this chapter.
All of them in this chapter. I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so what I want to know is, though, do nicknames count?
Go on, give me an example.
Brynden Blackfish.
No.
No, no counting.
I thought
Okay.
about it. If he was called Bryndon Blackfish Brown, sure, but he's called
How
Bryndon
about
Tully.
maiden names?
Oh, go on. Give me an example here.
Sybil Spicer.
Oh, very good. Oh, wow. That's better than I thought, actually. There is a POV character.
Oh, see, now I'm drawing a blank.
No, I knew if I threw it at you like that. This POV character, she gets a mention in this chapter. She's not in this chapter, but she gets a mention.
Well, there's Sansa Stark.
Ta-da! There's the one. And that's it. Honestly, it's hard. There are
It
very
is
few.
much harder in the hot seat
Yeah.
than you think it is.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. All right. Well, so normally at this point we give funny stories about what's happened in our lives. I don't have a lot, but my son did trot out a slightly funny story, but it was very disturbing actually. This story at the family call, my son, who's 19, so he has sort of college age friends, and he's at community college, and he was saying that his best friend, who goes to the local university, has a roommate who's a little not the sharpest tool in the shed, shall we say, and the my son's friend called the roommate and told him that there was an active shooter on campus, which was a lie, and then crept into the room to scare him. And I was like, and it did scare him.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, and I was like, that's a little bit too much, actually.
That's
But
actually a lot too much, I
that's what
think.
I thought as well. But then my brother came back with a story which, when he told it, I remembered it from when he was at college. When he was at college, he and now I'm thinking I might have told this story before, so you'll have to interrupt me if that's true. But my brother lived in a hall of residence which was several stories high, and one kid got very drunk, and while he was drunk, they switched his room with a ground floor room. They took all the posters off his walls and took his all of his pictures, and they put it in a ground floor room. And when he got home, they put him in the elevator and then jostled the elevator a little bit, but then got out on the ground floor. And
Oh
then the
no.
next morning, one of his friends came to his room, which obviously they'd left open so they could do this, and said he was feeling very depressed, and he jumped out of the window, which was 2 feet from the ground instead
Right.
of 100 feet from the ground. But it scared the kid to death.
Oh no.
Mhm.
That is a great prank, though. I love
Oh
that.
yeah, it is a great prank, but it's again a little too much.
Yes, and I don't think you've told that story before, or if you did, I don't remember it either. So
Uh,
maybe nobody else will.
yeah, but when my brother was telling it, I remembered him doing it. I remember because he actually my brother followed in my footsteps to college. I went to Sheffield University, and my brother followed behind me a few years later. And I think partly that was because he came to visit me one week, well, like a long weekend, and he had a great time because he was sort of 17 and he was hanging out with all these college kids, and we were and it just so happened it was an event in Sheffield called Pajama Jump, where everybody went out in their nightwear and went to the nightclubs, and there was kind of a lot of cross dressing and a lot of debauchery, and I think my brother fell in love with it. He was like, "This is the place for me." So he probably disappointed that it was just an annual event. Really, he probably thought the whole place was like that all the time.
That sounds fun as well.
So Jenny, what I mean, apart from being the ghost of High Heart, what do you do for a living?
I am a floral designer at a flower shop.
Ah,
So
very
hopefully I
good.
make people smile all day.
Well, yes. So, how is that? There must be fun stories associated with this.
Well, there are fun stories. I can't share exactly what's on the card messages, but I will tell you that we get some really racy card messages at the shop. They're so racy I can't share the good ones with you because it would not be appropriate for this podcast.
I just can't imagine. I mean, do they actually come in and say the words to you? Has that ever happened?
I've never had anybody do it in person. I have
Okay.
had them do it over the phone.
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? Well, you don't have to, but I have to.
Yeah,
Ah, yeah. People are just different.
they
I
are.
mean,
A
I
lot
could.
of them are, they don't care. There's no shame in their game.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Um, All right, well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Catelyn Stark? So, last we saw of Catelyn, she was attending the funeral of her father. She was hosting a delegation from the twins and negotiating the marriage of her brother Edmure to Rosalind Frey. She was learning that Sansa Stark was now married to Tyrion Lannister, and that a big chunk of Robb's forces were wiped out at Duskendale, that Roderick Cassel was dead, Winterfell burned, and the Walder Freys were at the Dreadfort as Ramsay's guests. It was not a slow news day at Riverrun. Jenny, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. King Robb, Catelyn, Edmure and company are headed to the Twins for the Lord of Riverrun's wedding. Queen Jeyne is staying behind, but she's prolonging the goodbyes. The farewell is touching, but Cat knows it is for the best. Robb is going to have to ignore some insults if he's to revive the relationship with Lord Walder Frey, and he's prepared to do so. But if those comments were aimed at Jeyne, whose very presence would compound the insult to the Frey's honor, Cat knows he has too much Ned in him to let that slide.
In fact, 5/6 of the Westerling contingent have now been shed. Jeyne, her mother, and her sister Elena, and her younger brother Rollum have been left at Riverrun, and her uncle, Rolf Spicer, is escorting Martin Lannister back to the Golden Tooth. Only Sir Reynold, who's Jeyne's other brother, is part of the party. He's the royal banner bearer, and cheerful enough to not rise to any bait from the Freys. Young Rollum had been Robb's squire, but Oliver Frey, Robb's prior squire, would no doubt be at the wedding, so best not to rub salt in those wounds.
Martin Lannister's return is an exchange that brings Galbert Glover's brother Robert back. All of this means that Grey Wind is back at Robb's side, to Cat's relief. Brynden Tully leads at Riverrun. It is a long ride, and miserable weather is slowing their progress. There are 3,500 of them, so they're not making good time. Cat worries about further offending Lord Walder. Robb studies maps for some way out of the larger mess, and Edmure continues to whine about the attractiveness of his future bride.
Cat snaps at her brother and then regrets it. She recalls that she herself was disappointed when she first met Ned. He was so unlike his cheerful elder brother Brandon. They pass through the Whispering Woods where Cat sees the scars of the battle fought there, but now shrouded in autumnal colours, where it had been summer when they'd fought here. The rain has washed out all the bridges over the Blue Fork, so a long detour around its headwaters at Old Stones are needed.
Robb tells Cat that after the wedding they'll head north. She's puzzled, but he'll tell her no more. At Old Stones, they survey the ruined castle and graves. Cat tells Robb the story of King Christopher Mudd, and he recalls the song of Jenny of Old Stones with flowers in her hair. Robb is worried about the future. Jeyne was not obviously pregnant when he left. Bran and Rickon are gone. He won't let Tyrion inherit Winterfell, and he believes Arya dead too. He suggests legitimizing Jon, but Cat bridles at this.
She points out that it could cause trouble if Robb does have children. Jon and his descendants would have a rival claim. The Blackfyre rebellion lasted 5 generations. She refuses to support his decision. He pulls rank and insists. Cat chats with Mage Mormont, who she's grown to like. Mage talks about Jorah's wife, Lyness Hightower, a proper lady, but not suited for life in Bear Island. Cat recalls Lyness telling her that she herself felt like a fish out of water at first in the north, but that you can come to love it. Progress is slow, both for Lyness and for the party heading to the Twins.
In Hagsmire, Jason Mallister catches up with them, and Robb's senior advisors gather. There is a stranger present. It turns out he is a sea captain who has been detained in Pike for half a year. Balon Greyjoy is dead. Story was he was crossing a bridge when the bridge gave way. His body washed up 2 days later. His brother Euron, who's been exiled for years, returned before Balon was cold, sat himself on the seastone chair, and drowned those who objected.
The captain is dismissed, and the party discusses Iron Island politics. One thing seems certain. Victarion will leave Moat Cailin. He'll leave a garrison, but vulnerable. Robb wants Mallister to send ships into the streams of the Neck, flying his banners, with the hope of getting a message to Howland Reed. The plan would be to march on Moat Cailin in force with the Freys and the Boltons, but with Reed's help send a large contingent around to the north and attack the Ironborn from there too.
Then Robb commands Cat to go with Sir Jason Mallister to Seaguard and wait out the remainder of the war there. She would prefer Riverrun, but he doesn't want all of his loved ones in one place. She grudgingly consents. Then he produces a document that he wants his battermen to witness, which is intended to shore up his legacy. Cat is powerless to stop it.
All right, so concerns about the Westerlings. So the Westerlings, that's Queen Jeyne's family, right? They
Right.
are bannermen to the Lannisters, okay? And I'm still a little bit concerned about them. Do you know why I'm concerned about them? It's because of Grey Wind.
Yes, that is a big red flag.
Exactly. If the direwolf doesn't like them, you know who else the direwolf didn't like? The guy with the dagger who tried to kill Bran.
Good point.
So it is interesting who's being kept close and being shunned. So Rolf Spicer's been sent away, but on a do good mission. But he is going back to the West. Surely he'll. What's going to happen to him when he reaches the West?
Right. Well, I mean, he's betrayed the Lannisters, but he's
Right.
also going to talk to the Lannisters. So what if he flips back the other way?
Exactly. He must have enormous amounts of intel about what Rob's up to, about how many forces he's got, that kind of thing. So that whole thing just worries me. I do think they're making good decisions not taking too many of the clan with them to the twins, because Walder Frey is clearly able to detect insult at 1,000 paces.
Yes, I think that was actually good counsel from Cat for once.
Right, right. Yeah. Um, and also I think knowing Rob as well as she does was good to keep Jeyne away because
Yes.
I can and I think just generally guys are like this. Guys can take insults, but if somebody insults their wife, that's different. That's always gonna make them more angry.
Agreed. So, do you think that leaving all of the Spicers at Riverrun was a good idea? Or the four that are there?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it feels to me like Jeyne is not in on this. If this is some kind of plot against the Starks, Jeyne is an innocent patsy. That's how I feel. She clearly loves Rob. She wants to be with him. But is her family, do they feel the same way? I have no idea.
Yes, I am kind of. I don't like the way that Lady Sybil treats Jane, so I would be concerned about maybe the mother being involved.
But so what's she done? I mean, again, one truism of this is that I don't fake the not remembering stuff. It's all genuine. So what has she done to make you be concerned about the way she treats Jane?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's just something I've picked up because I think that she's just polite. Does that make sense? She's polite to Rob, but not. I don't buy it, I think is what
Huh.
I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they always make me nervous. And again, it's the Greywind part because they haven't done anything yet. But if Greywind doesn't like them, then I'm a believer in the direwolves.
Yes, because it wasn't it Rolf that Greywind definitely didn't like?
Was I think in particular, yeah. I mean, the others are
Yes.
kids basically,
Right.
so it's Rolf that he was particularly offended by. I do think it's slightly funny because one thing that's mentioned in this chapter is how relieved Cat is that Greywind is back by Rob's side. The biggest fan of the direwolves, apart from me perhaps, is Catelyn Tully, who isn't
Yes.
from the north. But she's the one who saw what Summer did to protect Bran, and so she's absolutely her her belief in the direwolves is unshakable, even though apparently three of her children are dead. At least she believes that to be the case.
That's true, and they all had direwolves, so that didn't exactly save them.
Oh, actually, yes, that's a good point. Actually, the one that she knows for a fact is still alive lost her direwolf.
Correct.
Huh. I hadn't even thought of that. So there's an interesting comparison here between Galbert Glover and Brynden Tully. So Galbert is part of this party, and that's sort of like it's not a slur. I mean, he's going to go with the lords to the big wedding, but it's sort of perceived that as a military leader, he's sort of loyal and steady. Whereas Brynden has been left with charge of protecting Riverrun, where you need a little bit of martial prowess, and that's what Brynden has. He has a real talent for this that Galbert doesn't have.
Yes, I think Kat mentions that her uncle is brilliant
Yeah,
at martial prowess. So,
yeah,
yeah, that's definitely kind of a downgrade in a way for
yeah.
Rob.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Um, the other one I'd like to mention at this point is Edmure. So, as you know, as a listener, you'll know I've defended Edmure for a long time. I guess I feel like King Canute sometimes against the tide of things that Edmure does wrong, including missing with his bow and arrow shots against his dead father. But even he's wearing on my patience now. He's griping to Freys about the attractiveness of his future wife. I'm like, there are bigger fish to fry here, Edmure. There really are.
Exactly. he's gonna have to just live with whichever wife he gets. So
Right.
being morose about it this long is not helping anything, especially when you gripe about it to their kin.
Yes, exactly. It feels like a very millennial trait to me, but I mean, perhaps that's just me projecting a little bit there.
Well, I know that Kat is against legitimizing Jon here. Not a big surprise considering how she feels about Jon. How do you feel about it, Simon?
I, I feel good about it. I think it's a really smart decision, but I do later on. I'll give you what I think should actually happen here, and it may actually happen because right at the end of the chapter, they're a little bit ambiguous about what it is that Robb has presented for the Lords to witness. It doesn't necessarily. The implication is it's a document that legitimizes Jon, but it doesn't. They never actually said that. Kat feels like she's been railroaded by it, so it's obviously something along those lines. But all right, I'll get to my idea. But
I was going to say, we never exactly find out what the paper says. He says he wants to legitimize him and leave him as his heir, but we don't know how it's worded.
right, um, I think I will say this: Kat would never agree to this because she doesn't like Jon. She doesn't like what Jon represents. But her arguments actually do make a certain amount of sense. I mean, the comparison with the Blackfire Rebellion is perhaps a little bit stretched, but it is true. If Jeyne were to have children and Jon has been legitimized and Robb were to die in battle, then you've got babies who are the natural heirs, but then you've got Jon, who is a legitimate child of Ned Stark, who's an adult, who's fought battles, who could certainly take over at Winterfell. So she's not wrong to be worried about that.
I agree. I think that if you flat out leave him as an heir and as the king, just, right off the bat, it's hard to make someone the king and then go, oh, I'm sorry, just kidding, you're not the king anymore.
Right, right. Which is why. So here's my suggestion: make it a will. Make it his will, Rob's last will and testament. Rob's last will and testament should be: if I die without children, then I legitimize Jon Snow to become Jon Stark and to be my heir. If I have children, that doesn't apply. Those children can legitimize Jon Snow if they choose to.
Yes, I think that's a good plan.
Yeah, the one thing that made me wonder, and you might be able to help me with this, because the one thing about you, Jenny, is you have encyclopedic knowledge. You are good at this stuff. Is the concept of a will a thing in Westeros?
Well, I know for sure that there's a precedent with King Robert. I mean, he left his will with Ned when he
Hmm.
died.
He was writing something, yes, but
Yes.
but was it a will? Did they ever say that word? Because I mean, he was writing a document to sort of express his wishes, and they were end of life wishes. But if you really had a will, you would have that written in advance of going on the boar hunt. You would think, you know what I mean?
Off the top of my head, I can't really ever think of any other
Yeah,
time that I think, I think that's what it is last wishes. I don't think
yeah,
the word will was ever used.
yeah. So that's what I would do, and of course that's we don't know what was being said at the end. So it could have been exactly that. It could have been precisely what we're describing, and fingers crossed that it was, because I don't want to put Jon in that position, because if Jon gets legitimized and somehow freed from his bondage, because that's one thing that isn't made clear. I thought a king could free you from your Night's Watch vows. I thought that had been said before.
It has. It's not exactly respected, but I mean,
Okay.
I think a lot of people think even though, yeah, you can do that, they think that you shouldn't.
Right. Because in this chapter, they talk about taking 100 men up there and saying, you can have these guys if you'll give us that one back, sort of thing. So it was kind of like a trade rather than a royal decree.
Well, I think that the watch would actually rather do that. I mean, who wouldn't
Yes.
want 100 men over one man? But another precedent for you. When King Aegon died and his brother Aemon was at the wall, they wanted to have him come down and be king, and he'd already said his vows.
Ah, that's right. That's right. I'd forgotten that. And the Night's Watch was going to let it happen, but he refused, right?
Correct. Yes, he
Right.
chose not to.
Yeah. The plan to take Moat Cailin back does seem reasonably strong. I would be skeptical of it were it not for the Balon Greyjoy news. But let's just think about it as sort of what we know now. It's only going to be relatively lightly garrisoned compared to what it was going to be. And because they can now get ships around it to where Howland Reed lives, the hope is, and let me make sure I get this right, what Howland Reed is going to come south of Moat Cailin and guide a large contingent around to the north so that they can attack simultaneously from north and south.
Well, yes, they're sending 2 ships up the rivers, and Robb wants Howland Reed to send 2 different guides so they can attack from 2 different places in the north, and then the Great John will attack from the south.
Right, that's right. So yeah, I mean, the trick with attacking Moat Cailin is you can only ever attack it from one side, but here you are. By the inside knowledge of the Crannog men, you can do it from
yes, I was
more than
going to
one
say,
side.
Howland Reed probably knows all of that like the back of
Yeah,
his hand, so he
yeah,
can sneak him through there, I'm sure.
yeah. So I wonder if this was always the plan. If the news that they got from the captain in this chapter actually just made that plan a lot more palatable, but this was always going to be what they were aiming for.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think that comes up. I'm sure that this news about Balon is a great boon for this
Yeah,
plan.
yeah. Um, I actually maybe what that really gives them is the ability to send the ships up the rivers into the neck. Maybe that's where this plan comes to fruition because the the Iron Islanders were probably patrolling that kind of area fairly because Moat Cailin can look after itself. You don't need that big, but with enough of a force holding it, you would send out scouts and patrols to make sure that people weren't circumventing you by ship.
Yes,
And
but I think if you'll remember, the neck is, a lot of swamps and bogs, and I think it changes a lot. So
that's
I'm
I've
sure
heard
they're
that.
not
Yeah,
going that far from Moat Cailin because they may not be able to make it back.
they are seagoing. I would think that some of them would want to be on boats. You know what I mean? But that's a very good point. I mean, you split your forces into a force that can't communicate with one another because they can't re-find where you are. Not
Yes.
easily, anyway. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they'd be lost forever, but if you did take a channel that took you a different way, it would take time to find the way back.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the biggest news of all in the chapter potentially is the death of Balon Greyjoy, which was very accurately predicted by one Jenny of Oldstones, I believe. She told Arya and Beric Dondarrion that. Do you remember the exact wording of
Well,
it?
that was the ghost of High Heart
No,
because Jenny's dead.
sorry. I keep referring to her as Jenny of Oldstones. That's right. So who is she then?
Well, we don't have her name. Her name is never given anywhere in this series so far. So,
Is it
um,
known that Jenny definitely died?
this series, if you don't see a body, you don't know
Yeah,
where that person might be. Are they dead? Are they
yeah.
alive?
And she would only have to be like 80 years old, right? Something like that.
Um, yeah, I think that was about 80. Well, she'd be pretty old by now because I think that was about 90 years ago.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty old. That is pretty old. Okay, I'm not believing it's Jenny anymore. Okay, let's just call her the Ghost of High Heart then. So what did the Ghost of High Heart tell us? I dreamt of a man without a face, waiting on a bridge that swayed and swung. On his shoulder perched a drowned crow with seaweed hanging from his wings. So,
Yes.
uh, Balon was on a bridge when it collapsed. Uh, the man without a face sounds like a faceless man. We talked about this as well. And the drowned crow with seaweed hanging from his wings, Euron Greyjoy is known as Crow's Eye. So there's a
Yes.
connection there, perhaps. And he wasn't very subtle. If Euron is to blame, and we don't have categorical evidence that Euron is to blame, he wasn't very subtle about when he returned home.
He was not.
Yeah, he came home within 2 days of his brother dying, as if he'd been waiting offshore for the signal to come in.
I think he should have waited a little bit longer. That would have been the smarter move.
Right. It could only have been more suspicious if he'd arrived 12 hours before his brother died. That would.
Yes.
I,
Well, I think the whole bridge thing is suspicious anyway because Balon Greyjoy has lived at Pike basically his whole life. I'm sure those bridges are checked all the time because they're exposed to sea air and salt water, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
that bridge story just sounds fishy.
yeah, yeah. Um, but I will say, I mean, normally I don't remember anything, but last week I said that I thought this Euron Greyjoy was up to no good, and look what happened. Lo and behold.
You were right. Or at least we were pretty sure you're probably right.
So you know something about this captain that I didn't know.
Okay, yeah. So this is just one of those little fun stories that George tucks into the story that doesn't have any impact on anything, but it's kind of like an Easter egg where you're like, oh, well, that's fun. I didn't know that. The ship Myraham is the same ship that Theon took to Lordsport when he went home to treat with his father. So the captain's daughter would be on that ship.
So, so right. So the captain who's reported the news of Balon's death is the same captain who took Theon to Pike, and basically he's been imprisoned on Pike ever since because they basically closed the ports.
Yes.
Wow. So just throwing this out there, Theon may well have impregnated this guy's daughter.
He may well have, yes.
He may have a grandchild who has a claim to this throne. And in fact, we know for a fact that this guy was in Pike at the time of the murder and fled the scene. I got motive, I got opportunity. This guy needs to not be ruled out. I'm just saying.
That's true. That's true. And I mean, he was on that ship for a good few days. So, yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
entirely possible.
Yeah. So all of this becomes the potential turning point for the Starks because the succession battle that's going to rage in the Iron Islands because there are so many claimants. I mean,
Can I interject here
please.
and say that the squids are squabbling?
Oh, it's very nice. Well done. I like it. So the thing is, if Theon hadn't been taken from them, if Theon hadn't been at Winterfell all this time, if he'd grown up there, there'd be no question. Theon would be next in line to the Seastone chair.
Yes.
But he's just on the outs, and now we don't know what the heck's happened to him. Last we saw of him, he was captive of Ramsay Bolton, and we know Ramsay doesn't treat people very well. So his sister Asha has a claim as she's actually Theon's older sister, so she by primogeniture she should be have a claim. But the Iron Islands seem like a not very progressive place in terms of women's rights, I'm guessing.
I agree. I'm really skeptical that they would allow her to rule.
So that leaves Balon's brothers, and we know three of them still live. I believe there was a fourth who died in childhood. So there's Euron, who I don't know how people are going to feel because they can't help but be suspicious that he murdered Balon.
That's true.
I mean, it's not very subtle what he did. Secondly is Victarion. Now, Victarion is the one who's holding Moat Cailin. So he's got a choice now. The Starks have concluded he's going to up and leave and take most of his captains with him to bolster his claim, which is why Moat Cailin becomes vulnerable to them. But the thing is, if I'm an Iron Islander, I'm like, wait a minute, you betrayed our great gain just for your own personal gain. You came back just to get the throne when you had Moat Cailin, which meant the North was ours.
Yes.
So I don't know how that holds up to sort of scrutiny either. And then last is
Aeron?
Aaron, of course,
Yes.
Damp Hair, the very
Yes.
one. Now again, he's a bit of a religious zealot, and again, I'm not sure what the Iron Islanders think of that. I'm not sure what Iron Islanders think generally, I have to say.
I don't know how religious most of them are. I will say that Melisandre is quite a zealot, I think, and there's a lot of followers for that religion.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But would they necessarily... Okay, let's put it this way. If Melisandre had a sister who was kind of cooler, less annoying, had a big army behind her, they might choose her over Melisandre. Just being, she's getting a following, but it's kind of like of the religious variety rather than the we want you on the throne variety.
That's true. There's probably a bigger following for the second faction.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
So, Catelyn Stark in this chapter wishes Theon had died at the Whispering Wood because she points out, well, in her head, she says Bran and Rickon would still be alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you forget sometimes all of the crimes that can be laid at his feet, and and Kat must just feel so mad at Robb for it because if Robb had just listened to her about Theon from the get-go, none of this would have happened. I mean, keep him close. He was fighting for you. He could have been Robb's friend and roister, but sending him on that mission was really shooting themselves in the foot. And you just think what it's just meant to the whole psyche of this battle. The fact that they've
Yes.
lost Winterfell while this has been going on, and it was
Yes.
all because of this terrible decision to send Theon home.
So that's another decision of Kat's that I agree with, where she told Robb not to send Theon, and
Uh,
he did it anyway. I don't always agree with Kat's decisions, but that's two.
I wonder how much of that do you think was based on her evaluation of Theon, and how much of it was based on her knowledge of Balon?
I would say it was probably some of both because
Yeah.
Ned did have to go fight the Balon, basically the Balon family during the rebellion, and I'm sure he talked to her about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing you see. Even if Theon was a really good kid, noble of heart and honest and true, when you get home and your dad psychologically abuses you, it could change you, and you might. I mean, because that's when I'm feeling generous towards Theon. I think about the scene when he gets home and how his father treated him, and he was left with no choice. He couldn't he couldn't fulfill the mission he was given by Robb and not be treated as dirt by the Iron Islanders.
Yes, yes, it was basically a choice between his father or Robb.
Yeah, but but the kind of father who wouldn't give you that choice. It wasn't like he was saying you have to choose between me and those people. It was like you are no longer my son because you are doing this.
Well, yeah, it was definitely an ultimatum. I mean,
Yeah,
I guess Theon could have left again. I don't know that his father would have done anything. He might have,
right.
but we'll never know.
That's true. That's true. So, one thing I'm really looking forward to this succession story, but I'm concerned we're never going to see it because, like, we didn't see Balon's death. You know why? Because we don't have a point of view character in the Iron Islands. The only potential candidate is Theon himself, but we don't think he's getting back there anytime soon.
No.
So, unless we add a new one, I'm afraid that this is all going to happen off camera, and I'll be sad if that's true because I'd like to see it.
I don't know. I feel like that's too big to not have a point of view, but we don't know at this
Yeah,
point in the book.
yeah. It'd be interesting. I'm sort of pretending, but I'm sort of not pretending that I remember or don't remember whether or not we get a point of view person. But I literally don't remember which one it is. And
Well,
so
I could tell you the answer to
I know Jenny, I know that you've got it.
that, but we better not say it on the air.
Yeah, yeah, because it's definitely, presumably a spoiler.
It's a spoiler.
Yeah. So one thing that's happening at the end of this chapter is that Kat is being shipped off to Seaguard with Jason Mallister. Now, um, I, I'm I'm of the male persuasion, and you are of the female persuasion. Did you notice what I noticed? That Jason Mallister kind of had the hearts for Catelyn Stark.
Now, see, it's funny that you say that because I did not notice it any of the times that I've read this book before until you pointed it out. And then I was like, huh, well, now I'm looking at it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, partly it's being a guy and knowing what guys are like. You're like, if Jason Mallister says one slight nice thing about Catelyn Stark, it's probably because he's got the hots for it. I mean, that's, breaking it down to the fundamentals here. But yeah, he seemed quite happy that he would be hosting her for the rest of the war.
He did.
Yeah.
He seemed to be consoling her, or even maybe kind of talking her into it.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely encouraging this plan. Uh, so if this happens, if this is the plan, is Kat's part of this story coming to an end? Because it feels like that's a bit of a dead end, Seaguard. I mean, it it could be a staging point for a kind of battle with the Iron Islanders, but it's not really.
It could be, but it feels like it's a little bit far south for that.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
yeah, I mean, potentially we could be losing her as a point of view.
Huh. And I mean, we mentioned it earlier, but what do you think they were? What do you think the document said at the end of the chapter? Do you think they said Jon Snow is legitimized, or do you think it was contingent?
You know, I would like to think that Robb would make it contingent. Um, I can't say for sure, and I'll tell you that that is still in debate.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so at the end of the fifth book, none of the point of views that we get have divulged what was in that paper that the
All
Bannermen were
right.
signing.
This is why we brought you in, Jenny. This encyclopedic knowledge. Okay. Well, I think we're done with that. So now, will you take McKelly's role and give us some background?
I will. Okay, so the background today is going to be on House Mud. Um, so we have Robb and Catelyn standing before a grave in this chapter, and Robb is wondering whose grave it is.
Which town? Sorry, Jenny. Which town were they in?
Oldstones.
They were in Ulster. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so Cat tells him that this grave belongs to King Christopher IV of House Mud. House Mud once held the Riverlands all the way down to the Blackwater Rush, so that's down by King's Landing.
Wow. Yeah.
In the time of the first men. Oldstones actually had a different name when it was in existence.
Was it Youngstones?
It might have been, but actually, nobody knows what that name was. It was lost to time, and that's why everybody now just calls it Oldstones. It was the largest castle at the time, though, when it was still in existence. So, of course, Harrenhal probably put it to shame, but.
Mm-hmm.
So King Christopher IV was known as the Hammer of Justice, which. How do you feel about that name there, Simon?
Oh yeah, I definitely think he moonlighted as an ambulance chasing lawyer. Is what I think. And who else would call themselves the Hammer of Justice? Really?
Well, maybe a '60s cartoon character in a comic book.
Yes, that too.
Okay, so the fourth, fought 99 battles alongside the Tullys and Arryns against the invading Andals, and he won all of them. Then 7 Andal kings came together and they defeated him. So that left his issue, which was Christopher V, and he was definitely no Hammer of Justice, so the kingdom was lost.
Wow.
And, but then we find out how Riverrun came to be, because one of those Andal kings, by the name of Armistead Vance, won the allegiance of House Tully through a previous Edmure, and granted them the land at the junction of the Tumblestone and the Red Fork, where his son Axel raised Riverrun. So that's how Riverrun came to be.
What I find interesting about that story, because thanks for doing the background. I really appreciate it. A lot of this was actually directly in this chapter. Normally we have to go fishing for it, but they actually told this story pretty much. All of this information was in this chapter. It strikes me as strange that the Tullys only raised Riverrun at the confluence of the Tumblestone and the Red Fork when they were given that land by the invading Andals. It's like, why didn't you just do that before they got here?
Well, I think it was because the Muds were in charge and the Muds did not give them any land.
That is a reasonable point. Possibly they didn't fight as hard for the Muds as they would have done had they been given a bit of land.
That's true.
Yeah, yeah. See, it's your own fault, the Muds. But anyway, yeah, thank you. Thanks. That was really interesting. And
Sure.
and it actually it really sucks that you can win 99% of your battles and basically end up dead because of the one loss. It's just war is a hard game.
Well, I will point out that kind of the same thing is going for Robb. He's won all the battles, but it's really not going all that well.
You raise a very good point. Yes, indeed. All right, comparison with a television show. I thought that this might have been skipped entirely. We're trying to sort of think back what happened in the show. I didn't think that there was anything of the journey between Riverrun and the twins. But that's not true. I'd forgotten about an en route scene between Cat and Robb. He's not mulling a return to the north. He's instead planning a daring raid on Casterly Rock itself. Catelyn says they'll need the Frey's strength, and Robb, is determined to get it, no matter how much abuse he has to take from Lord Walder.
Oh, I remember that now. Yeah, now that you mention it.
Pedantry Corner, I didn't see anything. I'm hoping you've got something for us, Jenny. This is your one chance.
Actually, I don't because
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you I am not a big pedantry fan. I'm sorry.
Oh, you know.
I I see the pedantry, I certainly do, but I like to ignore the pedantry. I
Yeah,
like to just move on, and I'm one of those people that don't like to know how magic is done either. So
that's
there
a
you go.
reason. That's a reasonable point. And honestly, I'm not trying to reveal the Wizard of Oz by pointing the pedantry. I am just honestly, it makes me realize how hard of a job it is to write a book of this kind of magnitude.
Oh, definitely. The size of them, you're gonna have some pedantry, and yeah,
Exactly.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's some good pedantry sometimes. But like I said, I just kind of I'm like, oh well, there's that, but I'm gonna keep going.
And I know we've been criticized for this, but I can't help but like bridle when a character makes a stupid choice. And then again, you can totally justify that because people are stupid, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, character choices. I mean, sometimes they need to be stupid for the story to be going the way it's going.
Right. True that. True that. Okay, news and notes. Normally McKelly does this, so this is a bit light this week. So we just want to send our love to McKelly and his mum and hope that she's doing better. And I will say, McKelly, I mean, not in any way to belittle your efforts here, Jenny, but he's the heart and soul of this podcast. He is diligent and tireless in creating it in a way that his co-host Simon is most certainly not. And so for him to miss an episode is not done lightly, and we hope he comes back to us soon. Although I do now have a plan for taking more time off because I know that Jenny can fill in any time and do it with excellence.
Well, I will be happy to do so.
Thanks. Oh, I told you actually, but I haven't told the listeners. My brother is just a little bent out of shape when he found out that you were doing this week. He was just like, ah, ah, what about? But as I pointed out to you and my sisters also pointed out on the call, they said you two sound the same. They won't know who's talking. So
Well, all I can say is, Rob, don't give me a bad review, please.
all right. Well, let's draw a line under this one. So is there a chance the Starks are going to get back home? Dare we dream?
I think we can hope, yes, and dream, but let's hold that in check a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of pieces that all have to fall into place, but they all feel logical to me. One is Edmure's coming to marry Roslyn. They're going to build bridges with the Freys. They're going to get Roose Bolton back on side because he's coming for the wedding as well. I don't know what he's been up to, but I think he's one of those people that if you leave him to his own devices for a while, he wanders off into his own imagination. When you bring him back into the fold, you can get him back on, four square with everybody else.
Well, I do have to say, this may have been more for the discussion part, but do we actually think that Walder Frey is going to accept this marriage as a new pact and forget what happened before?
So you think he would make them march this whole way just to slap their faces and say, "Go back home, you're not wanted here"?
Oh, I wouldn't put it past him.
I he's rotten, but I don't think. I mean, fundamentally, Edmure Tully is his liege lord. He owes allegiance there too. He's going to get his pound of flesh, but he's going to come around. That's how I feel.
I guess we'll find out.
Mm-hmm. And then the other parts of the plan for getting them back north, they also feel reasonably solid. There is this hope and expectation that Victarion's going to take his most senior captains and leave Moat Cailin, and that gives them the opportunity to get around, get Howland Reed on board, and there's a chance that they can get back north. So it's like a big chain of dominoes. As long as they've been put in the right places, you just have to tap one, and they'll all fall down, and you'll have a peacock at the end of it.
Let's hope they fall in the right succession.
Exactly. Um, and then is Catelyn going to be sidelined by this? I mean, or maybe you know what? Actually, what we're going to have is every so often we'll just dip into a Catelyn chapter, and her and Jason Mallister will be having like a bodice ripping romance by the sea.
Oh, so like one of those romance books with the people on the cover where they're half dressed
Exactly.
and yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Jason Mallister, tall and sort of like shirt undone to the navel.
Well, I'll tell you, that may be a little more cheerful than being inside Kat's head nowadays. Not that I can blame her, but sometimes it's pretty dreary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I can't wait to watch the succession turmoil in Pike. I don't know if you watched the show Succession.
I do. I do, actually. I love that show.
I love that show as well. They're such awful people. Oh, my God.
They are terrible.
Yeah. I think they should dress like Iron Islanders. It would be perfect, sort of like...
Oh, that would be. Yeah. That's...
Bring these two things together.
Yeah.
And then what will the succession mean when it all comes to fruition? I got to say, Clever Money says Euron, because Euron's got the most followers. He's obviously not afraid to do things like kill his brother. And he's battle hardened. I think he's going to take the Iron Islands. That would be my bet. And then what does that mean for the North and for the Westeros as a whole? Because the whole North thing is a bit weird for the Iron Islanders because it's just too big for them to hold.
It's too big for them to hold, and it's far from the water when you get more inland.
Exactly. It's the fattest part of the whole continent. Most of it is way far from the water. But he's clearly not going to be... If he's ambitious enough to murder his brother for the throne, he's clearly not just going to sit on that throne in Pike and be pleased with himself.
No, I don't think he's going to stop there if he is the one to get the throne.
Exactly. Also, what's he paid? If it's a faceless man, the rumor is that that's an extortionate payment. So what is the payment going to be?
I have an idea of what he might have paid with, but I think it's a spoiler, so I can't say.
Oh, well, when we stop recording, just let me know.
Okay.
And will we welcome a new character, Jon Stark, to the fold?
Doesn't that just sound kind of weird?
It does when you say it. I do occasionally flub my lines and say it, but yes, saying it intentionally is weird.
I think that, I don't know, I mean, Jon has wanted to be a Stark his whole life. So, I mean, from Jon's point of view, that may be the best thing that's ever happened to him. But he's also very honorable. He's definitely more like Ned's son. And so, I mean, would he give up his vows, for one thing?
I did say, I think, at one point that I thought that if they freed him from his vows, he would just retake them.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that.
All right. Jenny, this was weirdly good, honestly.
Really? Because I feel like it's been terrible.
No, it's been fine. I mean, we're not quite as smooth as me and McKelly are, but I mean, like, I'm talking 10%, not 50%. And we've been so much quicker. McKelly and I take an hour and 40 minutes to record an episode.
Well, I'm probably not as
verbose
as McKelly is.
No one is. Okay, no, it's been an honor and a pleasure. You're welcome back anytime. There's 3 ways that you could help us. You could... that made it sound like I was talking to you, Jenny. There's 3 ways that you, the listener, can help us. You could leave us a positive review. There's no better way to spread the word. You can buy merchandise at ghostofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level, and get to do cool things like Jenny does.
Yes, and as always, you can reach these 2 jokers at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. Follow them on Twitter at ghostharrenhal, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube. And when I say these 2 jokers, I mean Simon and Mac, not me. You can find me on Discord, but that's about it.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.